Get it going here. Yep, that's our title bar. So what is the line underneath that? That starts with file, edit, stuff. What do you call that line? Nope.
Menu bar.
Menu bar. And what's under the menu bar? Toolbar. So toolbar is always the icons, the pictures. The menu bar is just the words. And then if we look at this Visual Studio window, it has a few other types of controls. What are these? Tabs. That's all easy. The hard stuff is remembering what the title bar and menu and toolbar are called, because we use them so often we never even think about it too much. A couple of others that could be important to us as we're creating here. That one doesn't look very good. Let me find one. Whenever we have these things over here, what are those called? Checkboxes. And if we have checkboxes, obviously we can choose more than one of them, right? And that's a standard. If it's a little square box, I can choose multiples. What if I have a group where I want them to be limited to only one item? What's that called?
Radio button.
Radio buttons. And they're always in a group like that, right? Usually. So we're always going to see a group of checkboxes where they can select multiple, or a group of radio buttons where they can only select one. Some other things on this little form, it has a nice drop down where it's asking for the font. That drop down list is a combo box for us in C#. It also has some buttons that we can click to do things. Now that's a big difference, because with our console-based applications, when we started running our code, it all just kind of went top down, didn't it? So even though we might have an if statement or a loop statement that would alter our control of execution, it's just from beginning to end. When we start looking at a Windows form, it's not that way. It's event-driven. That means I have a certain amount of code that I want to execute when someone clicks the OK button. I might have different code that executes when somebody clicks the cancel button. Maybe this manage click event is something completely different. So with graphical user interfaces in Windows Forms, I can associate the code with the event that happens that makes the code execute. So let's try one. It'll mean more. I'm going to open Visual Studio. Now, when I'm looking at Visual Studio, I want to create a new project, but we don't want to press OK or anything yet. Just want to make sure that we're using the right type of project, because we are going to use a different template. So make sure you've got your Visual C# over here, but then in the middle in our template area, we want to choose Windows Forms app .NET Framework. That's going to load up all of the Windows Forms things that we need. I'm going to name this project CH9 First Form 102. Now, because this is a form application, when it starts up and loads, you're going to see your blank Windows form instead of any sort of code. So here's our form. It's right here in design mode, ready for us to build some things on it. Now, our Windows form designer lets us do WYSIWYG development, meaning what you see is what you get. So as you place things on the form, that's the way it's going to look. So it's a little bit different than HTML, where the formatting could adjust to a different type of device. That's one reason Windows forms are a little bit less dynamic, right? Because they assume they're running on Windows, but they give us a lot of capabilities. So here's our little form that's in design mode. We could run this application right now. Let's run it. We haven't placed any code in it yet of our own, but we can still execute it. Let me get it where you can see it here, sitting on top of that pretty wallpaper. So now my title bar is built. It says that this is Form 1. I've got the minimize button works. Does your maximize button work? Maximize, and I can close. So we get those basic components just built in without us doing any sort of coding or anything, because it's the Windows form. Is it okay? Your things work all right? You can run it? So let's add some things to it. Before we do that, look over here at your solution controller, or your solution explorer, and notice that we do have this Form 1 component that we hadn't had before. I want to look at the program.cs. We do have a program.cs, and we do still have a main method. In our main method, we just have a few lines of code that Visual Studio has put in here for us. So we have some application customizations, and then this third line of code is what's going to happen to make our form execute. So we're going to run a new instance of Form 1, and that's our form. So our program.cs is still there, but we don't really need to change it much. Now, you know how when you open in TFS, sometimes you don't see anything in this development window, and it can be kind of like you don't think anything opens. But if you go to Solution Explorer, you can double-click on your .cs file to start editing. That's how it is when you're working with the Windows Forms app. Sometimes when you open, your form won't be displayed in that development environment, and you'll think, oh no, my form's gone. But it's not gone. You can just double-click on it in the Solution Explorer, and it'll come back in your development environment so that you can work on it. So whenever we're working with a Windows form, we have all sorts of tools or controls that we can add to the form. Now, all of our tools are in our toolbox. My toolbox is over here on this tab. So it is auto hid. Now, is yours over there? If not, you might have to go to the View menu and find it and get your toolbox enabled. Because I'm going to be doing some Windows form development, I'm going to go ahead and push the push pin to pin my toolbox to my window so that it doesn't auto hide while I'm doing this. I can let it auto hide later, but while I'm developing my form, I'd like for it to stick there for a little bit. Now, with my Windows form, I can click on it and resize it. And we'll look at some other things that we can do with it. But before we do that, let's put a button on here. So if you look over in your toolbox, all of the tools are organized by categories. So if you were to look at all Windows Forms controls, you'd see a really big list, right? We have a lot of controls we can use on our forms. So the common controls are a nice shorter list, but they're the things that we use a lot. So let's try our common controls. So you see our things like pointer and your button and stuff. Well, I'd like to put a button on this form. I want to add some code and make our form do something. So I'm going to click on my button control. Now, when you are working with the toolbox, if you double click a control in the toolbox, it'll auto place that control for you in the top left corner of the form. I don't really like mine there, so I'm going to delete it. So while it's selected, I can just press the delete key and get rid of it. Now I'm going to draw it. So I'm going to click on button again. And this time I'm going to bring my point over, and I think I'm going to draw a button. That's a pretty big button. So now my button control is sitting on my form. It's ready for me to set some things up about it. Down here under my Solution Explorer, for all this time while we've been developing, this properties window has been sitting down there and we haven't really worried about it. Well, now's our time. It's a really important window. It shows us all of the properties that this button class offers us. So every time we add a component to our form, we can really think of that component as an instance of a class. This is an instance of the button class. The button class has all these different properties that we can set for our button. So the first one I want to set is the name of the button. I'm going to scroll all the way up to my properties window. Now, looking at the properties window at the very top, notice where the properties window title bar is. Again, where that title bar is, I could click and drag that properties window out of this docked position. So if I had 4 monitors, like we should, we would be able to drag our properties window up to the top monitor so that we could access it easily. We'd put our Solution Explorer over someplace else. Since I can't do that, I'll keep it all together. Underneath that, then, is a drop-down list of all of the controls on our form. Right now, we don't have many, so we're not going to look at that yet. Now, the toolbar that we have on our properties window, the first item is really important. The first item shows how the properties should be sorted. If this item here is clicked, sort by categories, you're going to see all your properties in a categorized view. So if you want to find the title or the text property, you're going to have to know what category that's in and go find it. I usually keep mine sorted alphabetically, the A to Z option, because that way if I'm looking for the text property, I can just go to the T's and I know I can find it. So if you look up here and you're trying to figure out what I just changed, remember I'm going to have it sorted alphabetically in my properties list so that I can find things. Now the next icon shows that we're on the properties list itself. The lightning bolt we'll look at here in a little bit before we're done today. And the key is what we won't really look at too much in our class. So I found all my properties in my properties window. Since I have mine sorted alphabetically, and actually it shouldn't matter if you have it set by category, the name of the button is up here at the top. This name property is the name that we're going to be giving button 1 as a variable. So I'm going to click there and select that. And I want to name this something that starts with BTN because this is a button and it's a convention in C# and in Windows Forms programming to use the first 3 characters of your control name is an indicator of what type of control you're working with. Since this is a button, I'm going to make those first 3 letters BTN. Now I want this button to do something that has to do with hello. So I'm just going to name it BTN hello. Now some other things about my button that I want to change. I don't like the way it says button 1 on it. So I'm going to go down and find the property that's the text property. The text property for most Windows Form controls is the property that shows what's going to display on the control. So I think I want this button to say something like, click me. Now when I type that and press enter, it changes what the button says on the form. Getting it? Now I can run this again just to see how it's looking. And my button isn't going to do anything because I haven't associated any code with it, but it's working. It's quick buttoning. It goes fast. Okay, let's put some code on it. Now, to associate code with it, again, it's super easy. You guys are going to look at this and you're going to see why Windows Forms has been so popular for so many years. To add code to this button, I'm just going to double click on it. And Visual Studio will open the code window and it's created the event procedure for me now, the method that's going to handle the clicking of my button. So notice how Visual Studio named this event. It starts out with my button name, BTN hello, then an underscore, and then the event name, which is click. When somebody clicks this button, this code is going to execute. If I had left my button named button 1, my method name would be button 1 underscore click, and very quickly things would get very confusing and it would be very hard to tell which button did what. So that's why it's important to name things. Yes, sir?
I named mine and it still says button 1 click.
Then you double clicked it before you named it. So you need to, at this point, you need to delete this out and double click on it again. And we'll look at how to fix that on down the roads just right now. That's what we want to do. So it's no big deal. Just for right now. Okay, so what we want to do then is we want our hello button to make something happen.
When you said delete this out, what do you mean by delete this out?
The method that it created.
Yeah, we did that and give the guy there.
Yeah,
Like a big fat error.
it was unhappy with
Control Z that and put it back and just don't worry about it being named wrong for now.
me. I already.
Will Control Z put it back? Okay, good. Don't worry about your names right now. We'll fix it later because it's no big deal for this one especially. Okay, so in our button event procedure, what we would like to happen is I think I want a message box to pop up. Remember we did that message box.show a few weeks ago. I want to do that. I want message box.show, and I think I'm going to say hello in my message box. So yeah, as you guys are learning, don't worry about too much about junk like that. I'll tell you, you know, try to name things and all that because we're working towards a goal. But sometimes when you're learning forms, it can be interesting. So I want to run this. Do we have anything happening now? We just added that one line of code. I should be able to click it and have my message box show up. There's my hello. So yay. Everybody's working okay? Good. Okay, let's make it do some more. Now, I'm still here in my code, so I'll put a comment. This is a nice message box. And then I think the next thing that I want to have happen, let's try. Oh, I know. I think I want to change what the button says. Right now, you know, it says click me. Let's make it, let's change that text property and let's make it say something else. Let's say thank you. Yeah, so whatever your button is named right now. So if your event procedure is named a little different than the control on your screen on the form, use the one on the form. Let's see if it'll let you. Try it. Now when I click, we should see our message box, and then we should see our button text change. Now one other that's fun, besides changing the text of our button, let's move it. I'm going to say, well, button, I would like to move you to the left by 200 points. So let's try that. I'll click it. I'll get my hello message. Oh, your form might not have been that big. You might have moved it right off of your form. Huh? Yeah, make that big window bigger. If it disappeared, make your number of points smaller, or your form bigger.
I figured out this should go on.
Yeah.
So we found out that the button has just the name of my button.
Nice.
But it's not the name of
Right. Because it doesn't matter what they're named unless they're associated with each other. So it's okay. Now what you're seeing is Everything in a Windows form is measured in points. It's not really measured in pixels. A point is kind of like something that could be a pixel, probably if your resolution was 1024 by 768 whenever the Windows form was really intensely developed, but it's not really a pixel. It could be just a unit of measure. So you have to do some experimenting sometimes to figure out what the right unit of measurement is going to be for you in your situation. Decide how you want to change things. Now, when we look at our form, there are some other things. If I go back to my form design and click on my button, some other areas that have to do with those units. If I look at in my button property, I'm clicked on my button, I'm looking at my properties window. In my properties window, if I look at the location property, notice you'll see the value of the X and Y coordinate for the top left corner of that button. I'm going to move my button and you can see those coordinates change. If I put my button up here in this top left corner, you should see, I'm not exactly on the corner, but you'll see that the top left corner of the form is location 0, 0 on the XY axis coordinates.
Is it measured off the top left corner of the button,
Right.
right?
Mhm. So the other thing that would care about units then is the size. So if you look at the size of our button, right now it's 308, 168, mine is. I could type in there in those fields and change that value if I wanted to. If I needed to make it exactly something for some sort of alignment. Now when we're working with those properties, we can change the X value, the Y value, or we might be able to change both of them using a comma in between. Now, some things that I'd like to change about our button. Let's try some stuff. First of all, on our form, we can set some colors and things like that that'll be defaults for our whole form. So if you look at your properties window, look up here. Look up here. Look up at mine. Unless you're looking at the one on your screen. This drop-down list will show you all of the controls. Come on. And what I want to do is find the form that's not going to let me. There it is. So the only thing the only controls that I have on my form are the button and the actual form. I want to switch to the form. Now I could do that by clicking on it, just clicking anywhere on the form, which is the easy way, or I could use this drop-down list, which is the hard way. But if you have something that you can't find, it's like missing, you know it's on your form somewhere, but it's back behind something else, you can use this drop-down list and find it. You'll be able to find every control in that list. Now, looking at my form then, make sure you're looking at your form's properties. Let's go set your back color. Now, I've got mine in alphabetical order, don't forget. So I'm going to find back color. When you're working with your form, please leave your form name Form 1 for now. As we get a little further into our Windows form development, we'll look at how to rename your form. But it can be kind of an ugly mess depending on whether Visual Studio decides to do it properly or not. It's one of those things where you have to do it right. So we'll wait until we're a little more experienced to change that form name. So let's leave it alone. Now for our back color, we have some different options for coloring. If I click the drop down, notice that there are 3 tabs. First of all, it has the System tab selected, and the System tab goes along with whatever Windows theme is in effect. So that's kind of nice depending on if you want to use the current Windows theme. So I can, right now, that's how mine is probably set. I could say that I want to use, the control as the background for my form. So that's kind of the default. Now, if you click on Web, you'll see that for the Web tab, there's a lot more colors to choose from. Get into a lot of different things. And then on the custom, you can kind of use the color picker to build your own colors. I'm going to stay, I think, with the web colors. And I'm going to pick something that's sort of a dark background for my form. Now, once I've got my form back color chosen, I'm going to go to my fore color. Again, right now, my fore color is using the current Windows theme, and control text is set to black. So I'm going to change it. I'm going to go to the web colors, and I think I'll use, I want something that's going to show up well on this awful purple I picked. So I'll try this Misty Rose. That ought to be hard to see. And then I want to fix my font. I'm going to expand my font category. Now, when we're working with our font, we have a couple of ways to do it. We can click the plus sign that expands our font category, or we can click on the ellipsis over here to bring up the font dialog that we're using like in Word and Excel stuff. So our font dialog gives you kind of a preview of your font, where if you just use the font properties, you're just changing them. Well, for my font, I'm going to make it a bigger font because it's kind of hard to see on the projector. I'm going to go up to like 14, I think, for my default. I want to use an interesting font so that we can tell that it's using my default. So let's see, I think that I'll do Lucinda handwriting because that's a big difference, but it's still a little readable. Now, notice because I increased my font, my form size sort of exploded. I've got some other things I have to update a little bit. So it's really good to do those form properties first. I just wanted to show you how to make that button work. Now, my button isn't working very well at all, and that's a bug. So I'm going to click on my button, find its back color property, and change it, and just change it back because it just doesn't work quite right. That's pretty ugly. Now, when we're looking still at our form properties, one last thing we need to change for our form. Up at the top in our title bar, Form 1 is not a very descriptive title for our application. So in our form properties, find your text property, and let's change it to something more meaningful. Hello, world. Now, some things on our button. Click back on your button. You can try any property that you want to try. I'm going to try some things that have to do with the look of the button. One that matters is flat appearance and flat style. You could try experimenting with those and see if there's any that you like. I'm going to make mine be like a pop-up. And I think I want my border size to be bigger because I chose this kind of ugly color. I don't know if that'll make much difference. Now notice that flat appearance. You have some other options that could be mouse over colors and things like that. Just so you know, there are lots and lots of things you can experiment with. Now I'm going to run our app again and see how it looks with these changes. And now my button is pretty huge, but it is still obviously a button with that pop-up style. With those colors the same, it can kind of hide. I'll click hello, okay, and then my button's sliding over. Now your button is going to keep moving, so we might want to take that out. All right.
Did you put button move left and not right?
It's like a padding. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
So I'll just comment out my moving my button. Now I wanted to put that in there because I wanted you guys to think about a really, really good Windows Forms app for beginning programmers. That's that one that's kind of annoying, and I can't really give it to you as an assignment, but it's the never-ending Windows app where when someone mouses over your button, you move the button out from under their mouse so that they can't ever catch it, catch the button kind of game, and that's a pretty good beginning Windows program. It's a really good experiment if you want to try something like that. So you're trying to move it as soon as they mouse over it is your event. So that's why I wanted to move the mouse button so you would see that you could do that. Okay, so how's your form look? Mine's a little purple. It's okay. I'm thinking I need an image or something on here to tone it down. Before I do that though, whenever somebody clicks my button, I think that I want to change what it says. I don't want it to say click me anymore after they've clicked it. So I'm going to go back to my code. And, oh, we did already. We made it say thank you. I forgot. Let's run it. Oh, it does say thank you. I was like, is it working? It is. Now, if you want to look at, yes, sir?
Is there a way to change like the background color?
We just changed the background color.
No, like when you click it.
Sure, how would you do that?
I don't know, button hello background.
Is that what that property was named? The one thing that's really cool about it, Alex, is whenever you're looking at the property list, they're named exactly what you would name them in your code. So if I want to change that back color in my code, I know that property's name is back color. So I still might have to fiddle a little bit with how to get the syntax exactly right, because back color uses a color, so it can be a little bit different than just setting something to a string. But I can always find that property name here in my properties list and know exactly what property I'm worried about. So what we could say, form one dot back, default back color.
Yeah.
So it's not giving us the color. And then you would see on the list, you could pick a color dot option. Let's see, I could make mine, make you guys blind. Yeah, it doesn't like it. It says, cannot be assigned to, it is read only.
Didn't you assign, or I knew you changed it to form one? Did we change it into form?
No, we didn't.
Oh, we changed it.
Yeah. So whenever you're working with the form, it's a little tougher. If we wanted to change the back color of the button, it would be a lot easier. But some of our properties like that are a little less flexible than others. So I'll let you guys mess with that one and see what you can do. Sometimes you have to reload it and do some really interesting things. But we need to get an image on our form because that's something you have to do right away. So let's go back to our form. And I want some sort of picture. I'm going to go to the internet and I'm just going to find a picture to put up in this corner. So I just want a hello world image. And I want something that's a little bigger than what I want so that we can look at some of the sizing options that we have. So I'm just kind of looking, let's see, what do I want? What do I want? I don't know, I think I want this weird one. Oh, this Arduino. So I want to save this picture to my machine. I can't just copy it. You know, I know some software packages allow you to copy and paste images back and forth. With Visual Studio, we're going to have to get this imported into our project. So we need to download it to our computer. So I'm going to right-click on it and save image as. Now, I don't need to keep it for a long time, so I'm going to leave it in my downloads folder. And it says LCD photo, so I'll be able to find that. Make sure you name it something that will be meaningful to you. So I've got my picture then. Now, once you find a picture, it's the picture box control that we're going to use as a container to hold that image. So find your picture box. I want mine kind of up here. Yours doesn't have to be there, but as we build our form, it might be easier if it is, but it doesn't have to. Now, when we put the picture box control on our form, notice it's just a little bit different. It's got this rectangle up here, and this is just a shortcut to some of our most common tasks for a picture box control. So if you click that, let's click Choose Image. Now, just like if you were creating a website, I don't want to use a local resource. I want this resource copied into my project. If I chose local resource and I said, it's on my C drive in my downloads folder and it's named this, and then I gave this application to someone else and they were trying to run it, they better have that image on their C drive with the same name if I want it to work right. No, probably not. So what I need to do is import this image into my resources for the project. So click Import, go find your picture, and then open it. Now you should see your picture here in this resources for the Visual Studio project. Then you can click OK. Now when you do that, before we fix our picture, notice that in Solution Explorer, you now have this new resources folder, and it shows you that that image is in your project. You see it? Now, my picture isn't the right size for that box. I knew it wasn't. So I'm going to try some different size modes. Right now, the size mode is set to normal, and that's not working very well. I could try stretch image. Oh, that's okay, right? It sort of tried to make the image fit in the spot that I had. It's a little stretched. I could try auto size. Yeah, auto size just changed my picture box to be the size of the image. That's not what I wanted. So Control Z.
You can change it in the, you can still do the drop down and change it back.
Back. I always like to see it back. Now, what does center image do? Nothing good for us. How about zoom? Which do you like better? Zoom fits in my picture box, and stretch image fits in my picture box. What's the difference?
Zoom is it maintains the proportion, but fits in the box. Whereas the stretch, it just fills the box and contorts it to fit in the box. So it doesn't stay the same resolution.
Depends on whether you want to keep that aspect ratio or not, right? So if I want to keep it, I'm going to choose zoom. Good job. So let's leave that as zoom. Now I'm seeing that border of my picture box. I won't see that when I run. Let's run it and make sure. Your aspect ratio may not have been different than your picture boxes. You may not have had that issue. It looks okay when I run. So notice how that border is just for while we're in design mode. Now I can click, get my message, says thank you. Okay, great. But I think that I just want my picture to show up when somebody clicks the button. I don't want the picture to be there to start, right? So let's try to change that picture. All of the controls and properties that are available on this shortcut tool are still available in the properties of your picture box control. They just have a couple of them layered up here to make them quickly accessible. But let's find, the one I want to find is visible. So right now, the visible property is set to true. I'm going to change that to false so that you can't see it, and then I'm going to look at my code. Now, I would kind of like to look at my code beside this form. So I can right-click on my tab and choose New Vertical Tab Group, and then I can see them side by side. I'd have to rearrange some of my other parts. Now that I can see everything, I want my picture. Ooh, it still says picture box 1. I better fix that name first. I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on my picture box, which I am. Go find my name property, and I'm going to name it Pick Hello World.
Wait, we're renaming the picture we put in there?
Yes. So it's actually just naming the container for that picture. All right, so now let's change that visible property. So I've got my pick Hello World, and I want the visible property, and I want to set it to true. So now when I start, I should see nothing there. It's my ugly purple. Click, hello, and there's my picture. Is that working?
You go back.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that I'd like to have a label there. I'd like to say something about that picture and make that label show up. So let's see what we want. I'm going to undo that tab group thing because it's so hard for you guys to see, or at least it seems like it should be. Now, I want to come back to my controls, and I want to find a label. What's the difference between a label and a text box, do you think?
Would you be able to type inside that box?
Do what?
Would you be able to type inside a text box?
Mm-hmm. Whereas a label should just be display. And you'll see you can do both with either, but that's kind of the idea, is a label should just be something that we're outputting or displaying, and our text box should be something we're using for input. Now, I don't like, label one's not too helpful. Let's see, I'm going to make this label say something else. I'm going to find the text property and change it to say, I don't know, hello to you. And then notice with the label that the label is automatically sized. No matter what you do, you can't get it to stretch or make it any bigger. It always auto sizes based on the text that is filling it. So if we increased our font size, then that would increase the size of the label. If we put more words in the label, that would increase it. Sometimes people will put a placeholder in a label just so they know what it's going to look like. Click on your form.
Yeah, I have clicked on the
Mine isn't either.
You clicked on your form. Where's your form? You're not clicked on your form? Where's your form design? You have to be looking at your form. And you're running right now. Stop running.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna click on your form on that. Oh, that's right. Okay, and then you find it. Oh, okay. So anytime it's missing, you have to be looking at your form. You don't need tools if you're not looking at your form. So it's like, oh, I'll hide those from you. Okay. Find those labels, get a label on there. Now, our label, because we're going to refer to it in our code, A lot of times with labels, people will just leave them named, the default name, because we never mess with them. They're just like there to display information and we don't use them. But this one we will be referring to in our code because we want to make it start out invisible and then change it to visible. So I do want to give it a name. So let's go and find its name property, and let's name it LBL, Hello World. And by putting these prefixes on things, notice we can use a lot of the same names, but yet they're different because we have the different control type that we're using it for. Now, in our label, we've already set our text and we've set our name. So I'm going to leave that visible property is true so I can show you another way that we could set it to false. Whenever we have a Windows form, we have what's considered a life cycle. And a lot of people that are into gaming or game development are familiar with life cycles, right? Because you have the beginning, the initialization stage, maybe the update phase. We're used to those kinds of things. Well, when we're working with a Windows form, we don't have as many life cycle events, but we do have the form load event when the form is loading. We can add code to be executed when that event occurs. It's really easy to create the form load event. We just double click on a blank spot on our form. If I double click on a blank spot then, my code is going into the same .cs file as my button click event code, but it's got a new method name, form1_load. When form1 loads, I want to make that label not be visible. So I can do it right there. Now, if you're responsible for a system, which way would you prefer? Would you like for people to have it in the properties, or would you like for it to be readily available to you in the code?
Probably personal preference.
Maybe, but if you get into a brand new application and it has 75 labels and only 70 of them are set to be invisible, sometimes having it in the code would make it a lot more obvious as to which 5 are still visible. So think about it when you're setting those properties, because he's exactly right. It's kind of a preference thing. Some people like setting as many properties as they can and keeping it out of their code because they don't want to, junk up their code with setting up all of those properties. Other people like to have as much as possible exposed in the code so that the other developers see that this is happening. So it definitely is something that's a preference. Let's run this now. I still haven't made my label visible though, so I need to add that. I'm going to go back to my button hello click event, and right under where I made the picture visible, I'm going to make the label visible. So now my picture and its associated label should both show up together. Try it. Now I see my picture and my label. Everybody's working okay? Got it? Let me know if you're having trouble so we can get you back on track.
Is there a simple way to make it toggle a true false, or do you just set up a simple if true, switch to false, if false, switch to true? Like if you wanted it to be click and turn on and off every time you click it.
Yeah, there's all sorts of really cool ways that we could do it. One thing that we could do, let's see if I can do it right. Would that do it? So that's a pretty neat way. And it depends on whether you're in a situation that you can actually toggle them like that or not. But that works really well. So we're just saying what it set label hello world.visible equal to the opposite of what it is right now. So that works really well. And sometimes we have a whole list of those things. So it's nice to make them as simple as we can. Looking good, looking good. Okay, I'd like to add a text box. When we're looking at our form, right now, our user doesn't really have to do anything to interact, right? They're just clicking the button. So what if we added a text box up here, and we're gonna let them type in a message. And then if they've typed in a message, when they click our button, we'll use their message for our message box instead of ours, okay? That way we can use their text property. So let's find our text box control. And I'm going to make my text box be about the same size. Now, as you're drawing your text box on the form, notice the blue snap to lines that Visual Studio is giving you so that you can see if you're in alignment. As I move this around, I'm going to see snap to show up with my button control underneath and with my picture control to the side, so I can get things lined up if I want to look good. But there's some additional controls we can use for that. Right now, I just have my text box selected. Go ahead and select your other controls on your form too. Now I can press the control key and select all of them. I can also do that rubber band selection where I start up in the corner and hold and drag to select all the components on my form. Now, once I've selected all the components on my form, or more than one component, this alignment toolbar is going to show up here at the top. It can be really, really helpful if you use it. So the alignment toolbar lets you align things. Now, I did the rubber band selection, so the first thing I selected was probably my picture box. I'm going to click Make Same Size, which are these blue arrows pointing out. And that'll make all of the controls I've selected the same size. Oops, it looks like my text box was the first thing I had selected because they all became that size. So I don't like that, so I'm going to Control Z. And I could try some other things. Our form isn't really situated for these. I just wanted you to know that they're here. Like if I want to align everything to the right, I can choose Align Rights. And notice how that aligns the right sides. I can align lefts. I can align middles. You can align bottoms. You can make everything the same height. So you have a lot of options with that alignment toolbar. And some developers will just throw things on their form, literally. Throw stuff on there and name it, and then they'll start doing all of the rearranging after they've got everything on there and using those tools. Different people like to do things different ways, and Visual Studio gives you the flexibility to do that if you would like. Okay, so we got our text box on here. I want to have my text box be the only thing that's selected. So just like the other Microsoft products, I'll click somewhere else to deselect all those things I had and then select my text box. Now my text box needs to be renamed. So I'm going to name it TXT message. This is where we're going to allow our user to type their message. I don't think there's anything else about our text box that we need to change. Text boxes are pretty much, you know, what they are. So let's put some code in that has to do with our text box. Notice that I'm leaving the text property blank. Depending on your background, I know if you have a web dev background, you might feel like we need some sort of placeholder or instructions there. And that's just a little bit of a difference in conventions when we're working with Windows Forms, that we don't usually do that, but you could. Okay, so I'm going to go to our code, double click your Click Me button, and let's find that code. So in our hello button click event, I'm going to go to the top of that event and add a string variable to hold our message. And I think I'll just make it be hello to start. And then I'll put in an if statement. If our text message dot text property equals nothing, we'd want to use the hello one. So let's say if our text message dot text is not equal to nothing, we want our message to be set to the txt message dot text that our user typed in. You could try it. I don't know if it'll recognize that there or not, but you could sure try. Just let us know. Oh no, I didn't like it. Those strings sometimes are just a pain. Now I'm going to get rid of this next line of code. Oh, not get rid of it. Instead of displaying the string hello, I want the message box dot show to display our new message that we've built. Now, whenever we're formatting our properties, in the last few weeks as we worked with classes, you guys saw that we could do class name dot property name if we wanted something from one of our classes. This is exactly the same. This text box is an instance of the text box class. The text box class offers us text as one of the available properties. That property is what the text box class uses to display in the text box. So we can interact with that text box class just like we interact with any other class. So that's why we always have the name of the control followed by the period and then the property name. It really is the same. It doesn't quite look like it, but as we get used to it, it really is. So let's run now. Now our little message is set up. Here is my message, and I'll click. And now we should see our message display in the message box. And then I see my picture and my hello to you. Now if I click thank you again, we're still going to get it. If I delete it, we should go back to our hello message because we are checking for it to be spaces. So notice it didn't do anything automatically when I deleted that text. I had to click the button again. It's not that dynamic. We do have to actually run our code. Questions about it? Is it working? Okay, so great. Let's put a label up there. I'm going to go back to my form, and I want a nice label up here. And so for this label, I'm going to change its text property to say, type your message text below. And then we can just leave that label on our form. We don't need to change its name or anything because we're not going to be doing anything with that label. Our app is getting really close to something. I'd like to put another text box on it that displays like maybe a timestamp or some information. So I'm going to find my text box control, and I want to put another text box over here. Now, when I draw my text box, no matter how big I draw it, it just snaps back to one line because by default, a text box is only one line long. So in my text box properties, I can find the multi-line property and change that from false to true, and then it'll let my text box be more of a box like I want. Now, once we change that multi-line, the scroll bars will automatically be created by Visual Studio if they're necessary. So if we put something that's so big in our text box it won't show up, we can add scroll bars. Visual Studio can add scroll bars, so we can make it to where we can see it. Now I want to change the name of this text box. I'm going to name it TXT Time, because like I said, I want to display like a time stamp in here. One thing I notice about all the C# books, they never show you how to get like the current date and time, and that might be something you need. So we'll do it.
Can you not use the month calendar
Huh?
option? The month calendar option?
The month calendar option is to allow users to select a date and time.
Oh, okay. I thought that was the date time picker.
It is. That's what they're doing, picking one.
But there's the month calendar as well that's under the date time.
That lets them pick one.
Oh, okay.
So let's do this. In our code, I'd like to build this time thing that we're going to show. I'm going to come down past all of our visibility settings. We might want to change the order of things, but that's all right. We're just kind of trying to get some sample code in here, guys. So I think that I want to create another string variable to hold this message that we're going to load up into this text box. So I will call this time message, and it's going to start out as an empty string. My time message then is going to be kind of long. So I'm going to start out by setting it using one of those interpolated strings. I may not even need it for this one. We'll see. Thank you for using the Hello app. Now, when they get that message, I'd like for it to go to a new line inside of our text box. So I'll put our \n. Now I want to add more to that message string. And so I'm going to do the current date and time is. So now let's go Google or whatever web browser you choose. How do you find the current date in C#? I don't know, Google it. If I asked you to Google it, I want you to tell me.
Now.
That sounds good. Let's put it in there. Okay, so in our curly braces, we can say that. It's so easy, and they never show you guys how, and I don't know why. Datetime.now. Now, as I've got that date, time, and telesense drop-down showing, notice there's other things you could do there. So we can get .now, which is going to be the full long date. We could get .today, which would probably be a shorter version of it, but I'm just guessing, because I don't know for sure, but probably just a date instead of the date and time. We could get UTC now. What's UTC? What's Universal Time Code? Like Greenwich Mean Time. Like how far are we from it? 6 hours? Are we 6 hours ahead? Mm-hmm. So if we chose UTC, that would show that universal time. So we don't usually do that very often in our country, but in other countries they would use that a lot more than we do. Okay, so now we've got the current date and time in our time message. Let's put that into our text box. TXT message.text equals time message. Now let's run it. So I'm not seeing, oh, wait, I've got like the current date up here in my thank you message. If I run it some more, oh my goodness, now my date is showing up here in my message box.
We put it in the wrong text box.
Is it in the wrong text box? Good job. So we don't want to put it in txt message.txt. We want to put it in txt time.txt. So just like your console apps, when you're doing a Windows app, there is no magic happening. It's doing exactly what you told it to do. So it's not doing some weird thing that's wacky, that's because the computer hates you. It's doing what you told it to do. And I told it to do the wrong thing, right? So that's what it did. So now let's try it, putting it in the right place. So thank you for using the Hello app. The current date and time is, but I'm not getting my new line after that word app. Are you guys getting your new line after that word app?
I am.
Are you? With the backslash n?
Mine's wider than yours.
Yours is wider, so is it an accident? Can you change
Oh,
the
that
size of
could
it?
be.
See?
Yeah,
Change the size and see if it's an accident or if yours is.
we need to get that.
We need what?
We didn't get the lines to it.
Nothing? Okay. We'll fix it.
Line.
We just got to make sure his is good.
It was about there.
There's a way that you format that date.
Nope. It actually, there's no space or anything.
Nothing there. Okay, so let's fix it. Whenever there were typewriters and the world was not full of computers, they had to do two things to go to a new line. They had to do a carriage return, which pushes it back to the beginning of the paper, and then they had to push a button to do a new line. And it's so weird that we don't have to do that when we're using console apps, two things. But when we're using Windows apps, we have to do those two things. So we have to do \R for the carriage return, then \N for the new line. So let's try that. There you go. Now you can't see my date and time, and it's not showing a scroll bar, so it's making me mad. My font is causing me trouble, so I'm going to go back to my form, click on my text box, and on my multi-line text box, I'm going to find the scroll bars setting or property, and I'm going to change it to vertical because my message was just too big to fit in there. Now if I run it, I should be able to scroll down and find that time, which of course I wouldn't want. I would resize my text box and make everything work good. I just wanted you guys to see how easy it is to add that scroll bar in. And I'm sure there's a property somewhere to tell it to do that automatically. You can see how many properties there are. And there's developers, you know, developers get used to the properties that they use all the time. Okay, I'm going to close this. One more thing on our text box that we could change. We don't really want people to type in that text box. Could they right now? Yeah, that's not good. So let's look at our text box properties, and let's change the read-only property from false to true. And that makes our text box read-only, so it's kind of for display purposes only, and it won't allow people to type in it. So that's good. Those are lots of things for us. Now I want to look at the assignment that we have, your first one, because I think there's maybe one or two other things we need to do to make sure that you're good to start on it. You have plenty of time. It's not that. I just want you to have everything you need. So let's see if I can go there. Okay, so the first assignment you're going to work on is Project 7, the survey form. In the survey form, you're going to set up a Windows form to be surveying people. So survey them about something you're interested in so that you like creating the form and you can kind of get into it and get involved. You want to make sure you have at least one of each of these type of controls on your form. So some of these are going to require some research on your part that we haven't used to see what their properties are and how you're going to interact with them. Now you're going to have all these things to ask questions and then a submit button. So the submit button is going to kind of summarize this information, maybe like we did in that time text box. You might want to do it that way. You might want to do it in a message across the bottom. Either way is fine. Experiment, see what you can do because you have all these options. Now, it says to create a label that can be used to output this information. I don't care if it's a label or a text box or whatever you want to use. You guys have passed that time of hypergrade, clamping you down and being so particular. I want you to use what you want to use, be creative as you want so that you can try some things. We're past that careful time, thank God. So the one thing that we need then is a clear button. We haven't done anything like that. Let's put a reset button on our form so you know what to do. All right. So where's my beautiful app here? I think I want, my button's not going to be clear. It's going to be reset. So I'm going to find my button control. I'm going to draw this button kind of right under my click me button. You know, I'm thinking it might be easier for me to copy my click me button because look how that back color messes up, and I'm going to have to change all those properties to make it use that same 3D pop-up style that I chose. So I think I'll just delete this one and I'm just going to copy this click me button that I have. So I'll copy it and paste it and I can move it around. Now, just like any other Windows stuff, I can resize it. I'm going to get it to be the size that I want. And I'll use the snap to controls to make sure I have it lined up right under that other button. And then I'll change its properties. When I did the copy and paste, it did get reset to a name of button 1. So I'm going to change the name to be BTN reset. I want my text to say reset instead of click me.
You should lower a minute with the click.
Do I?
Yeah. Just to read all their data.
He's being mean. He's thinking of mean things. Now let's double click our reset button to add some code here. Now here's our code window. Again, all of our event procedures are going into, and these event procedures are just a special type of method. So they're still methods. It's just that they have this system stuff that's being passed as parameters. If we type our own methods for these events, we have to associate these with the controls that generate the events. I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Right now, we associated it by double clicking the button to create the event. That caused that association to happen. Now I'm looking, what kind of things do we need to do? We've got, let's see, we need to change these visible things back to being invisible. So that was our picture. And our label that went with our picture. I need to set that txt time, oh, and our txt message dot text, I'll set it equal to 2 double quotes. Now we can also, with a text box, I can say txt time dot clear. So I can do that either way. Either one will clear out the text box just perfectly fine. You could try and I don't know if that one would match a null better, but I don't think so. It doesn't like strings and nulls. But we can clear it. Now that gets our text boxes cleared back out. Oh, we need our button. Our button should go back to saying, click me.
Is there a way to just have it put it default? Like whatever it was before, like the other.
Not that we know of yet. So let's try running it. Okay, I'm gonna, oh, I've got this weird text box showing, that's okay. I'm gonna click me, and then there's all my stuff. And I'm gonna try to reset. That seemed to work. I need to type in a message, because I didn't test that. Click my reset button. It cleared it out. Does everybody look good there? Is it working? Okay, let's move on. We're going to run out of time here. I need a little bit more feedback from y'all. Let me know if you're having trouble or not so we can move on. As we get done with our reset, I'd like to add an event procedure that runs when someone tries to close our application so that we can see how to associate that event procedure with something. So if somebody tries to close our application, they're probably using the big red X because we don't have an exit button or anything on our form, do we? That'll be something for you guys to find out how to do that. But what I want to do is, looking at my properties, I want to look at the properties for my form. So I'm going to click on my form, make sure I'm looking at the properties for the form. We saw in the toolbar that the wrench icon says that we're looking at properties. So let's click that lightning bolt. And that says we're looking at events for our form. Right now, our form does have an event. It has that form load event that we created already where we set that label visibility to false in our form load. So it does have one. Let's create another one. What I'd like to do is find the event that says something about the form close or form closing. We have a few. We have form closed and form closing. We're going to use the form closing event. Now, if I click there, it does offer us a drop-down list. So if we had coded the event procedure ourselves, we typed it in, we could click this list and choose an event procedure method that we had already created, okay? But we didn't create this form closing yet, so I'm going to double click and it's going to create it for me. Now, when you guys are doing the form stuff, you can see why videos became so popular in learning, because these things are so easy to do if you're watching somebody. But if you're not, you're like, what? Huh? How do I do that? And it seems like a really complicated thing. So, you know, it's one of those deals where a picture is worth 1,000 words. I can show it to you, but if I try to type it out and explain it, it's going to be very long and involved and not make a lot of sense. Because we had to go to our properties window, click on the events icon for our form, find the form closing event, and double click on it. It's all easy if we're together, but a little bit long if I'm trying to write it out. So in our form closing, I'd like to pop up a message box and say, thank you for using our app. Wouldn't it? You'd probably want to take it off. So I could try some other things, but basically I want to try my closing event. So if I close my form, I should see, thank you for using our app. Very good. Any questions? Now, you're definitely going to have to, like I said, do a little bit of looking on the calendar control, radio buttons, checkboxes. That's good because there'll be some fun stuff. Don't forget, if you look at the textbook, there's probably some good examples there too. Yes, sir?
I accidentally closed the window of the form, like the visual form.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way I can tap?
Yeah, just come to your Solution Explorer and double click on form1.cs. Do you see it?
Has an error.
Okay, let me show you guys something before you go, because I didn't show the other class, so you might need to help them on Slack. So don't forget to Slack. So what if I let me show you what he did so I can show you how to fix it. So come with me. So I've got this label here, my text box. I don't want an event procedure associated with it. But let's say I accidentally double click it. So now I have this garbage in my code. I know you guys are like, I can't abide by this garbage in my code. I am going to delete it. So if I delete it, it doesn't work, does it? I delete it, go back to my form. Ah, my form is all screwed up. And that's true, it is. So what I can do is look at this error message up here. This is really nice because this is new. It didn't used to give you this help. It used to just like leave you hanging. But it says designer cannot process this unknown text message underscore text change. That thing I deleted. Doesn't know what to do because it's missing. It says right here, go to code. Yes, I would like to do that. Now, it has, this is the Windows system generated code. It's not our code that's mad. It's that Windows system generated code. So all we have to do is delete that line of code that has the error. I'll highlight it and delete that whole line. And then I can go back to my form and it'll be fine. So be very, very aware of that one. Help each other with that one. Because as a teacher, it's really hard to remember these things that are really awful and get you guys. And as students, you'll be able to help each other. Is that what yours was?
Yes.
Okay, good. I thought that was what it was, but sometimes it can be something different. All right, I'm going to save all. Now, I've been harping at you to save all along, but now you can see that you have all sorts of things that are being affected by changes that you make. And my folder now does not show the little star that showed that I had unsaved changes. Now, on my solution, I did add it to TFS when I created it, so I could check it in. But unfortunately, it's messed up and stuck in GitHub, so I will let you guys check in yours with TFS. I won't send mine to GitHub. I'll have to fix that. Okay, have fun with the assignment. Try to do as much as you can, explore as much as you can, get feeling comfortable with some of this stuff. It will really make our lives a lot more interesting than they were with console-based apps. So.